Okay, final chapter of the week, 26. Ted, very much against his character, left the house and has gone to look for Earl Court and to try and find Cat. Okay, 26. The Coriolis effect. As I walked, I thought about how tracking things down is very hard. Tracking the weather is one of the most difficult things of all. You can spot a hurricane as it crosses the ocean, but not know the exact path it will take or when and where it will hit land. There are too many variables that alter its course, such as the Coriolis effect. The Coriolis effect is very interesting. You can't see the Coriolis effect, you can't touch it, but it exists. It deflects things. It's a powerful force in the wind. This is how it works. As you know, the Earth rotates. If you're standing on the equator, you rotate with it. 40,000 kilometers away in 40,000 kilometers in 24 hours. You are going at 1,670 kilometers an hour, but you feel like you're standing still. The speed that you don't realize you are doing is your tangential velocity. But if you stand on the North Pole, you don't go any distance at all. You go round on the spot. Your tangential velocity is zero. The Coriolis effect happens because the difference between these two tangential velocities. If you throw something from the equator towards the North Pole, it won't go straight but crooked. The difference in the tangential velocities deflects or distorts it. Your missile lands a little to the right, but if you were standing on the equator and launched a missile to the south, it would land to the left, not to the right. Right in the northern hemisphere, left in the southern hemisphere. It's like the different directions of the water swirling down the plug hole. As I walked away from my house, I thought about the Coriolis effect. I thought about Salim's disappearance. Perhaps tracking Salim was like tracking the weather, only without knowing about the Coriolis effect. We didn't know what had deflected him, of course, but something had. I thought about distortion, deflection, whirlwinds and weather. I thought about north, south, male, female, full, empty, anti-clockwise, clockwise. I stopped on a corner. I realised I'd gone the wrong way and wasn't sure where I was. I'm a dyslexic geographer. I forgot my left from my right. My hand was shaking itself out until I looked up and saw the cumulus nimbus cloud, the cumulus cloud I noticed earlier. It hadn't grown into a cumulonimbus, it had hung from a glowing sky because the glowing sky behind London's tower blocks. Rain or hail, possibly thunder, approached. I headed back in the direction I came from, back past our house and towards the cloud. Somehow it felt correct. Sure enough, soon I was out on the main road, and from there I could see the underground station. Being a dyslexic geographer, I can't read maps. I've never known if I should read them upright or upside down. But there's one map I can read, which is the one of the London Underground. Because it's a topological map, you are in a universe where the spaces between points don't matter, and all that counts is the sequence of stops where the lines cross. You could stretch the tube map in all sorts of hoops and loops and it would be the same map, as long as the junctions were the same. I stood at the tube map for a very long time, then I found Earl's Court. It was on the green line and on the blue line. This meant I had to get the black line to Embankment and change onto the green line, or take the black line to Leicester Square, change onto the blue line. I decided the Embankment route was shorter. I bought a travel card and went down to the platform. I put my hand in my jacket pocket to stop it from shaking itself out. The sign said the train to High Barnet via Charing Cross was due. I heard a rumble in the tunnel, and then the train came into the station like a silver streak of lava pouring down a volcano. The doors opened, I went in and took a seat. The carriage was half full, or half empty, depending on how you look at it. Some graffiti was scratched onto the glass window opposite. No way. It was razor etched, with slashing parallel white lines for each stroke of every letter. This was a bad thing somebody had done just for the sake of it, like why Dr. Death killed his patients. A bad feeling started in my esophagus. Usually when I get the tube I'm with Cat and Mum, sometimes Dad. I like to tell them in advance what the next stop is, which shows how well I can read the map, but I also say how many more stops we have to go. But they were not with me, so I counted the stations and said their names in my head. That way I wouldn't forget to get off when I had to. Between Waterloo and Embankment the trains go under the Thames. It's a long stop. I saw a man staring hard at an advertisement for car insurance. He was sitting under the graffiti sign. His eyebrows were close together. There were lines on his forehead and his lips were pressed together, which meant he was angry. He also had a plaster on his cheek. I remembered how Sherlock Holmes once amazed Watson by working out Watson's train of thought. A train of thought is a good way to describe someone's series of connecting thoughts, because they are attached to each other, like carriages are by couplers. Holmes did this by watching Watson's face and the things he was staring at and making deductions. So I worked out the man opposite me was having a train of thought about a car crash he'd had, which was why he had an injury, and that the advertisement for car insurance made him angry because he'd not been insured. I was so pleased with this piece of deductive thinking that I nearly forgot to get out of the train when it stopped. A woman's voice announced, "This train station is Embankment. Please take care when leaving the train, as there is a gap between the train and the station platform." I jumped up with my hand flapping. I only just made it through the doors before they closed. Then I nearly fell down the gap, but I didn't. I followed the sign for the Green Line, westbound. I got the train saying Ealing Broadway on the front. I had 7 stops to go. It was a brighter journey, close to the surface. I could see flashes of daylight, I could smell damp. I didn't try to work out what any of my fellow passengers were thinking, but kept concentrating on the order of the stops, and at Earl's Court I got out. The weather had changed. Hail was bouncing off the corrugated station roof. Hail is a shower of irregular lumps of ice, and always come from cumulonimbus clouds, so I knew I was right under the cloud I'd seen forming earlier. Judging by the sound, these stones might have been 10 to 15 millimeters wide. I went through the ticket barrier. I stood in the ticket hall, blinking at the signs for different exits. A station guard came over. "Hey," he said. "You boy, are you lost?" I considered whether or not I should speak to him. Everyone knows you're not supposed to speak to strangers. We'd spoken to the strange man at the London Eye, and perhaps this was why we were in such trouble. But this man was in a London Underground uniform, and it meant it was his job to help lost passengers. "Yes," I said. "Where are you going?" he said. "Earl's Court," I said. "This is Earl's Court," he said. "Maybe you're after the exhibition centre." "The exhibition centre," I agreed. "Go up those stairs, keep straight through the tube exit, and it's opposite. Huge. You can't miss it," he said. He didn't want to say go left, go right, he just pointed in the right direction. Perhaps he was a dyslexic geographer too. "Remember to duck the hail," he called after me. Perhaps he was a meteorologist too. I made my way up the station stairs, veering slightly to the right as I did. This was because I was imagining that I was a missile, being hurled from the equator into the northern hemisphere, so the amount that I veered was equal to the deflection caused by the Coriolis force, and this made me feel good. Okay, so this is a huge step for Ted, a journey on his own, doesn't know where he is. He has now arrived at Earl's Court, he's never been there before, and he's going to be trying to find Cat. So have a think over the weekend. What is it that's going to happen next?